Welcome to Forza Horizon 5, where the online racing is home to a wide variety of wacky builds. Today, I'm going to share how to build the Purist. But what is a Purist? There are many interpretations of a Purist build. The definition I'll be going with is no engine swaps, no drivetrain swaps, and no Forza Aero. Before we can build a Purist car, we have to understand how to build, and that involves understanding the performance index system. The PI system is what grades a vehicle's performance. No one really understands it entirely, but the rough theory is that the PI system rates a car by having an AI drive the car on all of the base game asphalt tracks with a stock tune and automatic transmission. Since the PI system drives on all the base game tracks introduced after the game's launch are not accounted for. As an example, the tracks introduced in the Rally DLC are tight and technical, so cars with low-end traction dominate easily. Same goes for the Hot Wheels DLC and the handful of sprints added to the game. Those all favor top-end and high downforce due to their long and wide straights. The PI system judging a stock tune means, in theory, the more adjustable tuning parts we apply, the greater the potential for free pace. All cars in Forza have a preset shift RPM as well as a set shift time. This shift RPM is typically short of what would be considered an optimal shift point. So, it's beneficial to have your optimal shift point as far away as possible from that set shift RPM, as well as play on manual clutch in order to lie to the PI system about your car's true acceleration. With this understanding of the PI system, priority can be given to certain upgrades. So onwards to actually building a car. Step 1. Rice.
Put up like, can I park right here? Fresh from the pit, engine sounds nice with the new V6, and my kicks is clean, and I mean when I drive by, watch me lean.
With your car looking how you want it, it's now time for performance upgrades. The most important things to apply to any build are tires, weight reduction, and anti-roll bars. Weight reduction and anti-roll bars make cars much more drivable and are very cheap in terms of PI. Apply. Speaking of PI, tires have an interesting relationship with the PI system. Since you can change tire width individually per axle, here's where a lot of PI exploiting can occur. As a refresher, the PI system rates cars with a stock tune, so if the rear tires are made thicker than the fronts, the car will not want to rotate as much, and the PI system will judge the car as understeery. This means a low PI cost. This is good. Apply. Now obviously, we don't want an understeery car, but the PI system doesn't know about tuning, which again, we'll get to. What about tire compounds? Well, let me quickly go over all the tire compounds. Street tire, Resident B-Class tire, Vintage race tire, Resident B-Class tire, but for classic cars. White wall, trading grip for drip. Drag, low-end grip king, very strong longitudinal traction, but negative lateral traction. Dies in the rain. Sport tire. Rally tire. Best all-around tire with forgiving sliding. If your car can comfortably run it, it's likely a good car. Drift tire. Sacrifice low-end grip for top-end performance relative to the rally tire. Dies in the rain. Semi-slick. Street tire, but for S1. Slick. Grippier tire than the semi, and greatly rewards not breaking traction, but more punishing if you do. Also, dies in the rain. Now what tire compounds we use are decided by what class you're building for. How to know what tire compound goes to what class can be determined by looking at the lat G number in the car stat screen. B class boasts upper 0.9 lat G range. A class appreciates around 1.2 lat Gs, and S1 shows off in the 1.5 lat G range. The tires you typically see here in B class are either stock, street, vintage and white rolls, only featured on cars before 1970, or drags and rally tires, typically only used on front-wheel drive cars. If a car has good out-of-the-box handling, over 1 lat G, keep the tire stock. If not, they're on streets. If vintage tires are available, use those over streets. They give more grip and are well worth the PI cost. Want more power in your classic car? Put on white walls. For front-wheel drive cars in B-Class, things are slightly different. If a front-wheel drive car has good out-of-the-box handling, put on drags. While they may feel a bit weird and lose out slightly to other tires on long sweeping turns, the off-the-line traction completely makes up for it. If the front-wheel drive car doesn't have good intrinsic handling, apply rallies. For the most part in A-Class, you'll see rally or drift tires. Rallies are the go-to all-around tire, while drift tires are what to use if you want more top-end performance at the cost of handling and low-end traction. Front-wheel drive cars in A-Class also adhere to this, but there is also the common use of slick tires for front-wheel drive cars, as it's the only way for a lot of them to keep up in terms of handling. In S1, the tire selection opens up. Drifts and rallies are present, but as are semi-slicks and slick tires. If the car has bad intrinsic handling, below 1.5 lat Gs, apply slicks or semis. If a car has good handling out of the box, apply rallies. When building a car, it's important to understand how good its aero is. For those who don't know, aero is just a shortened version of downforce. A car with good aero will have little struggle taking long sweeping turns at speed, and won't need to invest much in this category. However, many cars don't have that luxury, so they need to compensate somehow. Enter roll cage and front tire width, the purest versions of the rear and front aero upgrades. Roll cage serves as a flat handling buff and becomes more valuable the less aero your car has. Cars that are struggling to hit ideal lat Gs for their target class are essentially required to apply a roll cage. If you're ever on the fence about whether to apply a roll cage upgrade, one thing I like to use to tell if a car needs any roll cage upgrades is to see if the 0 to 100 time decreases at the class limit with it than without it. Front tire width is another necessary upgrade for cars that don't have the luxury of good aero. It allows your car to turn sharper and with more influence. There's no real trick to knowing if your car needs it other than looking at the lat G stat and seeing if it's ideal or not. The faster the car class, the more likely the need for front tire width. Suspension is unique as each tier of suspension has its own intrinsic quality. The simplest way to explain it is the higher the tier of road suspension, the higher the speed it's useful at. This is because as you go up in suspension quality, the more balance your car receives. This sounds great, right? I love a balanced feeling car. Nope. In Forza, since cars tend to have much thicker rear than front tire width, fishing for imbalance is sometimes the only way to get certain cars to turn. As an example, the BMW M1 in A-Class has a huge difference in rear and front tire width. Applying race suspension just makes the car understeery, as it simply cannot load the front tires with any grip, even when tuned to do so. So the solution is to leave the suspension stock. The car is still intrinsically understeery, but it cooperates much better with stock suspension than with race, as the weight of the car is more free to move from front to back. Now this isn't to say race suspension is bad. In fact, it's insanely useful. As stated before, the PI system is blind to tuning, so the more adjustable parts applied, in theory, the better. I'm just putting it out there that you don't have to run race suspension. This graph shows the rough use case for each suspension. The faster you plan on going, the higher the tier of suspension you should apply. But you should also consider where your car needs the most help in. If a car has negative aero, it will likely need race suspension to help it out in the high-speed sweeping corners. But what about these guys? Rally and drift suspension. Rally suspension is the low-speed version of race suspension. Instead of balancing the longitudinal weight transfer of your car, it imbalances it more. It also allows for more turning angle. Very useful for front-wheel drive cars and the extreme cases of needing more low-end turnability. It's also sometimes worth picking rally suspension over race purely due to PI cost. Drift suspension isn't very useful. It's a stiffer race suspension that can sometimes find a niche by overriding Forza's heavily filtered steering and let you turn more, but the plus of having less filtered steering is outweighed by the negative of the stiffer feeling suspension. Optimizing your power output comes down to maximizing your average horsepower through acceleration while hiding as much of it as possible from the PI system. Recall that the PI system shifts at a set shift RPM point and is blind to tuning. So we need upgrades that will help redistribute and hide our power. Those upgrades are cams, street and sport transmission, and the centrifugal supercharger. Cams change your power output profile and peak RPM, as well as your set shift point. Applying the correct level of cams is super important. You can tell if a car needs cams by looking at the power output curve and seeing if there's a big drop off in power. If there is, it's likely you'll need to apply cams. If your car's power profile is a straight line, you don't need to apply any cams. Alternatively, you can build a car with cams and without cams to the desired car class and see if there's a difference in final horsepower result. Be careful with this method though, As cars that have their power profile as a straight line, adding cams may appear as an increase in power, but your car's set shift RPM also increases and exposes more of your true power output, and in reality, your average horsepower output throughout the gears goes down. The street and sport transmission change your final drive ratio, and sometimes the amount of gears you have, which changes how optimal the PI system's set RPM shift point is. A lot of the time, applying a sport or street transmission will decrease PI because of this. Other times it doesn't, but it's still needed because your car's top speed is severely gearbox limited. Speaking of top speed, here's the top speeds you want to be roughly aiming for each class. If your stock transmission hits close to these speeds, and applying a transmission upgrade costs PI, you should keep your transmission stock. One thing that's important to consider is the relationship cams and the transmission upgrades have. Since cams change the set shift point of your car, how much PI a transmission costs changes with each level of cams. Most of the time, if a car needs cams, it needs full cams, but there are a handful of instances where that's not the case. Now what about this guy? The centrifugal supercharger. This bad boy is the most busted power upgrade in Forza. The way a centrifugal supercharger works is the more RPM, the more power it provides. This combined with the fact that most cars' set RPM shift points are short of what's optimal, means the biggest gains in power from the centrifugal supercharger are hidden from the PI system. If your car has one available, apply it, and as many upgrades to it as you can fit. But what about all the other engine upgrades? Exhaust is the next priority upgrade after cams and the centrifugal supercharger, as it significantly reduces weight. After that, exhaust manifold if the car is naturally aspirated. The rest can be whatever. I personally try to prioritize applying the engine upgrades that reduce weight, like air intake, valves, and pistons, but there is no real priority here. The turbo and positive displacement supercharger aspirations comes down to what sound you want to hear. The intercooler and oil cooling upgrades add power as well as weight, and are often not worth to apply. You can check if they are worth to apply by looking at the exact horsepower and weight gain with the upgrade. If the weight gain is over 3 times the horsepower gain, it's not worth. Once you've applied everything in the prior steps to the top of your desired class, it's time to top off. Apply as many driveline upgrades as you can fit before going over. Combine this with changing what weight class your rims are to optimize your weight reduction. The differential is one of the most important upgrades, as it determines how much power your driven wheels receive while cornering. More on this when we get to tuning. You'll want to either apply rally or drift diff. Rally differential will be what is applied for most cars, as it provides the most stability and predictability. If your car has a big difference in front tire width from front to rear, apply a drift diff. Front wheel drive cars will want off-road diff. Now you may be asking yourself, why not race diff? Well, race differential has a very sudden transition from having traction to not having traction, as well as suffering from aggressive rear lockups while braking. Rally differential's traction loss profile is much softer, and drift differential reduces the annoying rear lockups while braking, as well as pushing the car more forward when traction is lost. It's time now to conquer every racing gamer's greatest fear: tuning sliders. In Forza, while it may look like a lot of things to mess with, most of it is set and forget. All the sliders you will mess with can be quickly tested and verified with the telemetry, which shares a lot of useful info. So let's get started with... Tire pressures are very simple. Less tire pressure means more grip, but also less responsiveness, and more heat generation. Each tire compound has its own pressure range it wants to sit at, as shown on screen. The only thing to look out for during testing is to ensure your tire pressures are equal front to rear when at racing speeds, as well as not getting cooked. Having them equal leads to a predictable feeling car, while having them not will leave your car feeling different each lap as more heat is generated. For cars that are running a sport or race transmission, gearing is available to adjust. As stated earlier in the build section, you're going to want to optimize for these top speeds for each class. You will also want to optimize for the start-finish straight on Horizon Mexico circuit. This is because this speed range features on a handful of tracks and gives a significant edge. You also want to make sure you are optimizing your average power throughout the gears. You can check this with telemetry. If you have a peaky engine, you'll want to shorten your gears. If you have a wide power band car, it's worth to widen your gears out and sometimes not even use your final gear. For a race transmission, you'll want to lengthen first gear so that it gives you the easiest time launching the car, and then adjust your other gears around that. Camber changes how much grip you have while turning in exchange for how much grip you have while going straight. Some games, it's the meta to max out camber, but in Forza, it's best to keep camber low. The camber ranges you want to stay in are 0 to 0.9 degrees. More camber means more lateral grip. You want more oversteer? Give yourself more front camber and less rear. Feel it a bit oversteery? Give yourself less front and more rear camber. Personally, I just set and forget camber. Everyone has their own starting value that they like to roll with, but I run 0.7 front and 0.4 rear camber values. Toe is for extreme cases of, bro, this thing won't turn. Front toe affects your corner approach, while rear toe affects your corner exit. Toe out means more oversteer, while toe in means more understeer. So, if you need more initial turn in, give yourself some toe out in the front. Need some help keeping traction on corner exits? Apply some toe in. You won't want to go more than 0.3 degrees in either direction, as any car starts to feel awful. In general, toe is a last-ditch effort for rotation or stability if nothing else works. Just max it out. TLDR, it gives more camber gain where you want it. Anti-roll bars are the primary way of dictating how much your car rotates when turning. Softer front, stiff rear, oversteer. Stiff front, soft rear, understeer. The play in Forza is always to max out the rear sway bar and adjust the front to what feels comfortable. While 165 by feel is the common joke in Forza, having a bit of stiffness in the front sway bar allows the car to be a bit more responsive at speed. I personally started around 1265 and adjust the front from there in increments of 3 to 4 to see what feels good. Spring rates are what determine how well your car is at staying connected to the ground. The softer the spring rate, the more grip to the ground, while the stiffer the spring, the less connected to the ground. As a starting point, keep spring rates under the F in the word soft, and reference your car's weight balance stat and use that to drive how your front and rear spring rates relate to one another. If your car's at 50%, have the spring rates be equal. If over 50%, give more stiffness to the front and vice versa if under 50%. Again, this is just a starting point, and we can come back to this if we need more over or understeer if ARBs and other things aren't enough. Ride height is what lets the suspension do suspension things. The higher the ride height, the more stable and more willing to weight transfer your car will be. So, ignore what you know about CG and apply max ride height. You can also rake your car in order to get more turn in at top end by lowering the rear to make it less stable. Damping determines how fast your suspension can move. The stiffer your damper, the slower your suspension wants to move, while the softer it is, the faster it wants to move. There are two directions of damping. Rebound exclusively determines the speed of your suspension when it's moving down, while bump determines speed of it going up. For rebound, you want to be around 9 and roughly follow the ratio you apply for your spring rates as a starting point. Ideally, you want your rebound as soft as possible without your car bouncing after encountering a bump. The best places to test out your rebound are around Plaza or Estadio Circuit, as they feature aggressive sudden bumps. For bump damping, have around 3 and roughly follow the suspension ratio you applied for your spring rates as a starting point. Here, you're trading weight transfer for responsiveness. If you want more grip while braking, soften the front bump. Want more rear traction on corner exit? Lower the rear bump. If your car has race brakes, brake bias and brake pressure can be adjusted. The brake bias in Horizon's UI is backwards, and setting it toward the front sets it to the rear, and vice versa. If you want more oversteer while braking, set your brake bias more to the left. Understeer towards the right. Generally, you'll keep the stock or give it a few clicks towards the left. Brake pressure is interesting because there's two philosophies when it comes to setting it. You can either set it to 120%, as this is what would equal when you would lock up with normal brakes, or you can set it to 90%, so you can fully press the brake trigger or the key and never worry about locking up. I'm personally a 120% enjoyer, but it's up to preference. Aero is how much grip or downforce you get as you pick up speed. Basically, the faster you go, the faster you go. More downforce means more grip at the cost of drag. If your car only has adjustable front aero, apply minimum aero. Cars with only front aero are the sketchiest to drive, as they have no rear grip at higher speeds, so it's best practice to minimize how much influence the front aero has. If only rear aero is adjustable, you will also want to minimize it. Except this time, there will be circumstances where some rear aero is desirable. If you find your car handling getting exponentially oversteery at speeds, apply some rear aero to stabilize it. I'd recommend applying in fifths. If front and rear aero are both adjustable, maximize front aero and run rear aero as low as possible while still feeling comfortable. A good reference for this is the measurement of downforce given on the right. You typically won't want to run rear downforce a crazy amount lower than the front value. but always start out with max front, mid rear aero to see if it works. The differential is what determines how independent your wheels can spin relative to each other. Accel is how independent your wheels spin while on throttle, while decel is when off throttle. The higher the percentage, the more locked your wheels will be to each other. But what does that even mean? With a low percentage, or open accel, your car's power will go to the inside wheel during a turn. This severely limits turning ability as well as power application. With a high percentage, or locked accel, your car's power will be more evenly distributed between both wheels, but because of this, is more likely to break traction during a turn. Rear-wheel drive cars, I like to run 100 XL as not only is it the most predictable on what wheels are getting power, but you can cope with the traction braking with throttle control. If that's not your style, or you're a keyboard warrior, run a lower XL setting. You're aiming for the highest value you feel comfortable running. Front-wheel drive cars is a similar story, except they are more likely to benefit from a lower XL setting as the driven wheels are also the steering ones. Again, I prefer to run 100 XL as it's the most predictable. For decel, the driving implications are flipped. When off throttle, a high decel percentage severely limits turning ability, while a low percentage you are more likely to break traction. Because of this, you will always want to run a 0 or near 0 decel value. There are instances where you'll want to run double-digit decel values, like for front-wheel drive cars, or if your car consistently locks up under braking, so don't be afraid to up this if you're uncomfortable off throttle. For all-wheel drive cars, both front and rear axles can be tuned as well as power distribution. What was described before for front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive applies here, but at the same time. For all-wheel drive, the starting point I like to have is around 85 front XL and 100 rear XL, and 0 decel. Power distribution depends completely on the car, but the range will always be rearwards biased. The goal is to have the bias as rearwards as possible without causing excessive oversteer. Now, sometimes the diff can just feel awkward no matter how you set it up. This is when you might want to try a different differential. The two I cycled through are drift and rally differential. Drift if I want more rotation, and rally if I'm looking for traction.
And that's it. Watching back, I realized I forgot brakes and track width. Brakes you should avoid upgrading unless there's no other way to get more PI. And track width, while does affect how your car feels, there isn't a noticeable gain in pace, so just apply it to get nicer fitment. And yes, there are exceptions to everything I said, so keep that in mind when building and tuning. But yeah, massive thanks to everyone on screen. I'm not sure how much sense everything in this video will make to all the new PS5 heads, but if you have any questions, just leave a comment, or ask me live on twitch.tv/Hidon228 if you catch me streaming on Horizon. Here's that clip, Silva.
Oh, Wait. No, wait, no!
Me when I lie to the PI system.